Third Eye Salon, in between going live. All right, so I've clicked the go live button, so it says we're live, so I believe we actually are. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on Third Eye Salon. So let's look and see who is in the salon today. Of course, we have my dear friend, Linda Coulter-Burge, psychic and conscious business coach, and she'll be chatting with you in the live stream today. Hey, Linda, looking
good. Everybody.
How are you doing?
I am so excited to be here again. We have such a special guest for you. And I have about this many questions already to ask. So I think we're going to already have to have him back.
But we're already booking part 2.
Booking part 2. I have a feeling that we're going to just want to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I feel like our guest is a walking library, both in information and experience. And then we have our friend and buddy, Jillian Leonard, ET and Spirit Experiencer. Jillian, your hair's on point, looking gorgeous today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited about today. I've been thinking about it all week.
Yeah, we had people excited last week when we brought him up that he was coming in just in our Facebook group. So you're known, sir. You are known and appreciated. And then here he is himself, paranormal and ET researcher, out-of-body experiencer, and podcast host, Preston Dennett. Thank you, Preston, for being here. What a gift.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I hope my hair is on point too.
Well, take some tips from Jillian. Get the curly hair out. And I'm Kat Udero, empath, entrepreneur, and psychic wrangler. And I've got all the psychics wrangled in one spot today. And we hope that you are sitting in a comfy spot with a good cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or maybe a glass of wine if you're in another part of the world and it's after 5 or whenever. So today we are going to be looking at between the veils of what it means to go from being a paranormal and ET researcher to an experiencer, to really embracing your own supernatural gifts, your superhuman potential, which is really what Mr. Dennett is all about. And so we're going to look at not only Preston's research on the ETs and the paranormal, but also how his research has inspired him to develop into what he's experiencing as superhuman, or what some people call metahuman, or the new human. So we also want to let you know that down below in the description box, we have got Preston's links he's got so many books. We'll get into that in a second, but we've got Preston's links for his website and for his YouTube channel and for his books. And also you can buy Third Eye Salon a cup of coffee if you'd like to support us. We have a little link down there that you can do that with. And then also we always invite you to like, share, and subscribe, to click on the notification bell, and to join our Facebook group and to really become part of the community. We have great conversations and we're very heart-centered, and we just welcome like-hearted people to join us in this adventure. So I'm gonna hop into Preston's bio and then we will get going. And I'm just excited. I want Jillian to kind of lead off with some of her questions because she's got so many that you can do that with. I'm getting to playback in my ear of my voice. All right, hopefully that just happened. All right, so anyway, back on point. Preston Dennett is best known for his passion on reporting all things paranormal, extraterrestrial, and otherworldly. But this warm-hearted, constantly curious, and psychically talented man has more than research to share. Mild-mannered reporter of Deep Strangeness, Preston Dennett has his own secret life experiences with precognitive dreams, regular OBEs, and other psychic phenomena. Exploring Preston's firsthand experiences against his years of research on these topics promises to make this conversation twice as rich. Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986, when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. Preston is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 27 books, and over 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been on Amazon UFO bestsellers. Preston's articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO, Journal, that is MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, and many, many others. He is also a winner of the L. Ron Hubbard's Writer of the Future, Volume 35. I watched that interview last night, Preston. It was you're so real. You're so authentic. Preston has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. And now he joins us on little old Third Eye Salon. Thank you for making time for us, Preston.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I'm excited.
All right, let us hop in. I really want to get into this I want people to know like the range of your work for one thing, because you have covered so much. And if you don't know, Preston has a YouTube channel where he just regularly takes like columns of information in terms of like, he'll take a theme, he'll break down the theme and then report on that theme, giving you all the different people, places, experiences that correlate to that theme. And we'll start there and say, Preston, what is one of the things that you have that's been of interest to you lately, some of the themes that you have seen emerging in terms of patterns of high strangeness or ETA presence in the world?
Wow. Okay. Well, recently, I think one thing that really grabbed me and really surprised me was schoolyard UFO encounters. And I've been in this field for decades and had no idea that this was a thing, that UFOs are hovering over schools and showing themselves off to young children. I knew about a few famous cases. There's one in Rua, Zimbabwe, the Ariel Elementary School case where a UFO landed behind a school and all the school children saw it. ETs came out, communicated with some of them. It's a really famous and well-known case. I'm like, wow, because I had heard of another and I started to look into it. And I had investigated one myself. So I started to look into it thinking, wow, this could be an interesting avenue of exploration, and thought I would find a few cases, and I found over 100. I was absolutely shocked. Found out like in 30% of these cases, they were actually landing next to the schools. The kids were seeing ETs. These are very low level sightings, long lasting. UFOs are putting on displays. Half of the cases are at elementary schools, but it really covers all ages up to college. And just blew my mind. I mean, I cried over this. I just couldn't believe it. This is absolutely one of their agendas, to show themselves to children.
What made you cry about that? What touched you to bring you to tears about that?
Oh, just the little kids and their descriptions. Kids are so precious and innocent. Many of them have never even heard of UFOs. And they're so, impressionable and undiscriminating and just innocent. Mm-hmm. And just their stories were just so precious.
What were some of their stories? What were some of the stories that stood out to you in all of these kids that were having these encounters?
There's so many. I think one that kind of sticks out to me was, I think it was Downey Elementary School, which is not far from where I live. And this UFO just came down over the playground. It was this beautiful silver globe, and it was setting off rainbow colors.
Wow.
And no teachers saw it in this case. In half of the cases, teachers do see it. And all the kids just stopped playing and were looking up at it. And the only reason it became publicized at all was because one of the kids told her father. And he ended up, going to the school and asking the teachers about it. And they said, oh yeah, the kids were all talking about it. And they all thought it would come back the next day. It didn't. But they all thought it was just this beautiful thing. And they were mesmerized by it. And this is sort of the pattern we see in each of these cases. I think the ETs have an agenda to just sort of show themselves off to kids and let them know we're real. There are other people out there. And it was just this beautiful, benevolent encounter that let kids know they're not alone.
Wow. So do you feel like there's a connection with this and because we talk about ET souls on this show, I would surmise that, you know, a lot of us are ET souls and that this isn't our first time on the planet. We come from elsewhere. I definitely think that's true of you, Preston. Do you feel like, and this is just me, you know, postulating, do you feel like part of their agenda is to be able to say, hey, we're here, don't forget about us, like you're in the dream, but we're real, and don't forget about us while you're in this dream? Like, that would be my take on it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of their main agendas, to wake us up to who we are, our spiritual heritage, what we can do. It's funny, I had the opportunity to see a channeler. I'm like, pick me, because we were in a group, you know, and he's picking up people. And he pointed at me and says, oh my gosh, I see a UFO over your head. You were an ET in a past life. I'm like, oh, wow, really? And this was, you know, very early on in my research. I don't think I'd published any books at that point, so I wasn't at all known. And he's like, yeah, I think you're here to help anchor the ET energy. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. And I just happened to have the opportunity to see 2 or 3 channelers right after that. And darn, they all didn't say the same thing. So that kind of blew my mind. I'm like, oh, okay. That makes sense, because I was really getting into it at that point.
Well, it's interesting because it's like tuning into you empathically, I can really feel it in you. Like, just because like you, I don't mean to like gush about your personality, but you are so sincere and sweet and authentic and dear. It's like you've got that, you have this like purity with you that, like, maybe it was challenged, but it didn't get corrupted, which makes you such a perfect representative for that link between the ET and the family and the human communities. You know what I mean? Because you have all the research, but you also you have the research for the humans, but you have the heart for the ETs, and you just are able to bridge that gap just by being you. And I would love for Miss Jillian to hop in here. I know that she's got questions, and she's got things she wants to ask. Do you have a question at this juncture, Miss Jillian?
Well, just in terms of research with the different phenomenon, like there's paranormal, UFO, extraterrestrial. When I started my awakening in 2017, it was very abrupt. And immediately, I mean, I had been into the paranormal for, I don't know, a decade and a half before this had happened. Like I was all about the investigations, just the phenomena in general. I would sit there and watch the shows for hours and hours. But then when I had my awakening, I started to meditate, and clairvoyantly, I was seeing different extraterrestrials while I was meditating. Like, they would pop up into my vision, same as if my eyes were open and I was looking at you guys. But then, so that notion came up to me, like, there are ETs, I believe that they're here. I've had OBEs during my meditations that have given pretty good indications. Like, for example, there was one I was doing, and it was just a blackness behind my eyes, and all of a sudden I was standing in my yard, and it was just as if it would have been like at dusk. It's kind of getting dark, but not quite, and it's just perfectly how it should be, except the only difference was there was a UFO that was just kind of hovering. Actually, it was above my neighbor's yard. If you're watching this, a surprise. But it was kind of hovering there and coming down. And I get that quite a bit in my meditations. Like, I'll connect with people who are deceased. I've seen, loved ones who have passed on. I see the ETs, I see the UFOs. So to me, in my mind, it all ties in together into one phenomena. Same with the physical contact during meditations. And, I've seen ETs manifest, I've seen ghosts manifest in my actual physical reality. And to me, like, it seems to be like it's all just one big thing, as opposed to there's the paranormal, and there's the ghosts, and there's the UFOs, and, the CE5, you can go and try to bring the UFOs in. There's the experiencers who are experiencing the direct contact. But I just want to get your take on if you feel like it all flows together, or if they're all each individual separate things.
Oh gosh, that is the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? There's a lot of interest in this lately. I came into this field very skeptical, did not believe in UFOs, ghosts, life after death, anything. And it was 1986, found out UFOs were real when I discovered my family, friends, and coworkers were having encounters. And I was not a happy camper. I was pretty upset. I was scandalized even because I just had to completely readjust my worldview, and found out UFOs were real. And that's when I started having out-of-body experiences. And my mom had passed away a few years earlier. I saw her ghost. So this all came at me at once and really shook me up. I do think they're connected. And having researched this for a long time, it's my assessment that, a ghost is, a spirit is a spirit. Bigfoot is Bigfoot. These, I feel like these are separate, but they're integrally connected.
Like the way they come, I feel the way that they are connected is just the way they present themselves to us, like the way they come through into our reality from wherever they are.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with consciousness. And as we raise our consciousness and, telepathy, that's a big part of this, I think. And that connects us all. We're all one. The universe is all one. And it's got all these beautiful little facets to it, which are absolutely connected. And I know this because I started asking people about UFOs. Did you see a UFO? Let me hear your story. And they would tell me, and they're like, well, I also seen ghosts, and I'm also having out-of-body experiences. I'm like, what? What? And so I started to realize, like, wow, there is something going on here behind the scenes. I don't think that this is all like one intelligence manifesting in different ways. I think when you see your deceased aunt, that is her. She is a real entity and will always be. And same with, ETs and Bigfoot and all these various phenomena, good ghosts, bad ghosts, the whole thing. But yeah, they are very closely connected. And when someone wakes up, I think it opens them up to experiencing all of this. And yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out because I've had cases where people will have like a UFO encounter. Like one case, this guy interviewed, this was one that really had me scratching my head. He had a UFO land in his backyard. Next night, he had a Bigfoot encounter. Following that, he had a poltergeist outbreak in his home.
So it was like a mixed bag all at once. Oh, man.
Exactly. It's like the veil just tore open and he was experiencing it all at once. And I've seen that over and over and over again. So yeah, they're absolutely very closely connected.
For sure. I wonder what triggers that too. Like when you start to get, because I've gone through something similar in a very condensed period of my life where it was just like what you said, one day it would be a ghost. One day it would be, an ET would pop up. The next day it would be a light being would come in. The next day I would wake up and there was something really creepy in my room. Like it's weird how the way I experience it is it comes kind of in phases. Like I'll have a phase of a lot of contact from various, different things. And then I'll go through a few months where there's just nothing. And it's almost like I put the experiences away in a kind of compartment in my mind until it starts to ramp up again. And I spoke to Susie Hansen when she was on here not that long ago about how experiencers, it's almost like there's two minds. Like there's the mind that has the experiences and it's just out of this world and it's mind-blowing. And then there's the mind that is in the 3D and you're doing your normal things, you're taking care of the kids, you're going to work, you're doing this and that. And it's almost the way that I experience it is these experiences are always in the back of my mind, but sometimes something will kind of trigger the memory to where it's just, I'll stop and be like, holy shit, I saw something crazy at that point. Like how is this not affecting me as much as I feel like it should be affecting me? And when I brought this up to Susie, I don't know if you know who Susie Hansen is.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. When I brought this up to Susie, she goes, well, Jillian, like, if you had this in your mind all the time, like if you had the experiences as the forefront of your reality at all times, you wouldn't be, you know, doing what you really came here to do in the 3D, which is anchor in the experiences as opposed to just walking around mind blown that these things are happening. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I feel like we have different levels of consciousness. You know, we all go to sleep at night and we don't remember a lot of it, but we're absolutely fully conscious on the other side. I've learned this from having out-of-body experiences, like, wow. And it's like we have different levels and we're aware on certain levels. And, you know, some people are just down here locked in the physical plane, but that doesn't mean they're not having experiences on the other side, which sometimes bleed through, sometimes they don't. But I think we're in a process now of we're connecting all our levels of consciousness together and becoming complete connected human beings. So all these experiences can sort of be forgotten or blocked away. We have like a super consciousness. Yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
Yeah, you know, looking into out-of-body experiences, there's a sort of a belief in Eastern tradition, at least, that we have not only the physical body, but the etheric, the astral, the mental, the Buddhic, and so on. I'm like, wow, because I'll be having out-of-body experiences once, and you're in your astral body, and suddenly you're leaving that body. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And a new one and a higher level.
Yes.
And so I think that sort of might be what's going on here.
I never think of that, like as in it, because I've, you know, when I've had OBEs, it's just I pop out and I'm somewhere else. Like I don't really consider that scenario is going on whether I'm there or not. Do you know what I mean? Like if I have an OBE and I pop out and I'm somewhere else doing something, and I don't know how to explain it either. Like it's just so hard to put into words that kind of experience. Like I don't think that maybe I'm there on another level doing something all the time.
Yeah, I think we are. You know, I think, you know, astral projection is a little bit of a misnomer because truthfully, we are projecting downwards from our true home. Being physical is actually an act of projection because our true selves, our superior body is on the other side. That's where we come from.
Yeah.
So we're actually projecting down here. And
that is mind-blowing. That's such a mind-blowing thing to think about. Like I have never thought of it that way before.
You just flipped it on its head where we're projecting down into our bodies. This is the projection. I love it.
Yeah, one day it just occurred to me. I'm like, hey, this, because you know, you go on the other side and it's so real. It's the colors. Oh, I mean, it's just really hard to describe how it's like, you know, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz when everything's suddenly in color and you're in the real true world. And being on the other side is like, wow, this is a super reality. And that's when I started to like, what is going on here? Because I'd come back and be like, oh gosh, I'm back on Earth. It's like putting on a wet bathing suit. I'm like, oh, this.
It does suck coming back. I have to agree. I've never had an astral or OBE experience and been like satisfied just slamming back into my body.
I know. I wake up each morning. I'm like, okay, I'm back on Earth. All right.
Yeah.
Out of bed.
I'm doing this again.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, the OBEs, I keep coming back to them because going to bed at night is like, I lie down, it's like opening a doorway. And it's like, I'm so excited each night to see what's going to happen.
Oh, for sure. Oh, I love it. Even my dreams now, like now that I have a better concept of what's going on, like in the dream realm and the, you know, just that whole thing. It's not just like you're hallucinating with your eyes closed and nothing's going on. Like I believe you're actually doing something somewhere. So I go to bed now and I look forward to my dreams. Like I look forward to that time. And yeah,
I used to think like dreams they're not real. They're very ephemeral. They're just kind of yeah, like you said, hallucinations. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, they actually last forever. They are, I mean, the world sort of physically deteriorates a lot faster than everything on the other side. You can re-enter dreams and have a continuing series of dreams. I
That's
love doing that.
I had a dream last night. I shit you not. I had a dream last night that I was in an apartment building, and it was this really like rundown, raggedy apartment building that for some reason I had rented. And I was going through it, and how would I explain this so it makes sense? Like there was a back door, and at the back door it was like an area that my kids could fall off of. There were like spikes on the walls. It was just weird, and it was dirty and dingy and gross. And I just, in my dream, I was going through it and I was touring it, and like the doors were falling off. Anyways, I woke up and I remember that I was in that exact same apartment in a dream maybe 6 months ago. And that in that dream, I had rented this dirty, dingy apartment, exact same layout, exact same thing. I forget where I was going with this because it's just something you said triggered it. Like it was the exact same place in my dream. And I had never seen this place before in my waking time, but it was the same place in both dreams. Like it's just so weird. Dreams are weird.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up the idea then, Preston, if you can speak to it, that like dreams are, we go to certain locations that are all, it's like there's dimensions that we're popping into, right? Like if I had this experience of like falling asleep, and I was already in the dream as I was falling asleep, and I was like, it was like the in-between stage, and I was like, oh, part of me is always dreaming, part of me is always doing something on that level. And what I'm thinking is, and you speak to this, Preston, if this is a situation of like Jillian's dirty, dingy apartment, that's a dimensional something where she's doing some kind of work there. She's doing some kind of cleanup work there or some kind of overhaul, whatever her mission is there. But that is a dimensional location where she's doing that. What do you think about that, Preston?
Yeah, I agree. I have a dream bookstore I go to. It's so much fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here again. Wow, where is this place? And yeah, lots of like parallel realities or probable realities. I feel like we think of ourselves living this one life, but I think we're living variations of our life in all these different, areas surrounding us. And, people talk about past lives. Now I think people are beginning to wake up to the fact that they're sort of present lives. And we're all, there's no past or future in the way that we think of it here on the physical plane. Time is really a product of perception here on the physical plane, which really becomes apparent when you go to the other side in the higher levels, where time kind of collapses and you can visit the past or see the future and all these different realities. So we're much greater beings, I think, than we might be aware of. And we're exploring all these different avenues, and you'll never miss the boat on anything you want to experience because you are actually doing it somewhere else. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. I want to pipe in for a second because that really brings to me a solid confirmation of experience I had where I had the same sequential dream of running a battle. I would look at this old map on I don't know, I remember now if it was paper, it seemed like a parchment of some sort. And I was night after night planning the next battle. And I used to get in arguments with history teachers about battles. And it's like, well, they were stupid because if anybody that knew what they were supposed to be doing would do this, and I was in elementary school, they would do this, and I would just get so mad. But I had this dream for 2 weeks in a row, and I would wake up exhausted, and like the weight of the world was on my shoulders because I was sending people to their death. And it was this duty. Like I had this very strong, visceral, if I don't do this, more people will die duty. And I was sending them to their death night after night. And the heaviness of it all was just such a toll. And it was very sequential. And the weapons and everything, there was this part of me that was still curious in the dream. Like, wow, I don't recognize these weapons. I haven't seen any of this before. This is really interesting as I'm watching this play out. And then at some point it was, I wonder what I look like. And at that point, I zoomed in on my hands, and there were these huge, burly hands sitting on top of the map. And I just pulled back and the dream ended. And I hadn't had it since. And then a year later, Gladiator came out. And I went to it in California, empty theater, it's weird. Went in to watch it, and that first 15 minutes, it was like a flashback for me. And I had this instant panic attack, and I had to leave the theater.
Wow.
And so I ended up getting myself completely sauced, walked back across the street, and did it again.
Completely sauced? Completely sauced?
It's like, I got to see what this is all about. So I went back, and again, only in the theater, and I'm watching it, and it was just that was it. The weapons, everything was the same time period. And it was just really, but it was so visceral. It was like this flash, it's like PTSD. Like, oh my God, I can't do this again. But I had to go back and see why I had such a strong reaction to it.
Wow. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I've had a series of what I would call soldier dreams. And I'm like, gosh, here I am in the military again. What is going on? And they're so powerful. I mean, the feeling of brotherhood I had with my fellow soldiers was unlike anything I've experienced, even with family. I mean, I would die for these guys. I loved them. And every now and then I'm back there and I'm feeling this again. And just reminds me that how truly multi-dimensional we really are. We cling to our current personalities, but personality is a little bit of a construct, I think, and we're much greater beings than I think we recognize.
That is so. Linda, this is the first time I've ever heard that story from Linda, so I'm just soaking that in. I love this notion that you said something so liberating, Preston, that like we don't have to be afraid that we're missing out because some other part of us is doing that work or living that life. Like we're still connected, even if it's not. What just popped in my mind was like a revolving door. So like you can walk into the revolving door and pop out in this dimension, that lifetime, this parallel reality. It's kind of the visual that just popped in, and as you hone your awareness, you can be more decisive about where you're going to pop out, like to this dream bookstore that you visit, which I want to go to that bookstore so bad. So what do you think about that, Preston?
Yeah, I love it. People sometimes ask me, well, how old are you? And I'm like, well, I'm about infinity. I'm 5 billion years old, because we truly are. We think of ourselves as, having, been born here. We have very few memories, most of us, of, kind of just fade into consciousness. And like, wow, what am I doing here? And we're trapped here on Earth, and it feels like forever. But as you, I think, begin to raise your awareness, you start to realize, wow, we do have past lives, or simultaneous lives, however you want to look at it. And I mean, we are infinite, and it's such a comforting feeling to know that we are a part of this universe. And when I realized that, I'm like, wow, I am actually here. I am a being, I'm an entity. And it just sort of, I used to be pretty fearful of death and dying. And I still am a little bit. It just seems like a weird system here to be on Earth. And like, we're going to die? Who designed this? That's not very nice. I don't like that at all. But now I'm realizing, wow, the universe is safe. It's wonderful. We're infinite, and there's absolutely nothing that can hurt you. And death is one of the best things that could ever happen to you. It's wonderfully healing. And you get to go to the other side, which is so great. It is so wonderful. So yeah, I think we are such an integral part of this universe, and we're so connected to each other. When I was having out-of-body experiences, I'd come back and you start like having like telepathy with other people. You're like reading their minds. I'm like, whoa. And you really feel what they're feeling. And gosh, it's just completely changed my life when I realized how closely connected we are to each other in the universe, and that everything is conscious. All plants, rocks, everything has consciousness. So it's really comforting and just liberating. I love it.
I feel like this is the thing you need to, this is like your next book, or the thing for you to start teaching people. You embody, your vibration embodies this wisdom. I could just feel it. Jillian, hop in and talk to Preston, because I saw you nod about coming back from an OBE and being more telepathic. I want you two to talk about that. Not jealous. Hashtag not jealous.
Not just from the OBEs, just when I started my awakening and I was having the experiences in meditation and just having the experiences, I became very much more empathetic to everybody around me. Like I could have a conversation with somebody. I was in management for quite a while until COVID started. But anyway, so I would have conversations in my office with people, and if they were upset, I could literally feel their emotions. It's crazy. And with the telepathy, it's not so much between humans, but I get it a lot. Like I get clairaudient messages from spirit or the ET side. And when I'm meditating specifically, or when I'm going to sleep, like in that state between being awake and asleep, sometimes I'll get full sentences come in. And there was one time I was getting ready to do a meditation, and I have been getting these messages for quite a while by that point, but I wasn't convinced at what was going on. So I kind of put it out there like, okay, in this meditation, I want to get some answers if what's going on is actually telepathy or is it not. And as I was meditating, I heard the word telepathy, but I also felt it come down into my consciousness. It was coming from the right, like up from the ceiling down into my consciousness in a spiral. Like I could feel that it was spiraling, and when it came in, it was the word telepathy. Wow. So it was just, it was crazy. So after that, I thought, okay, well, I guess it's telepathy what I'm experiencing.
Oh, I love it when that stuff happens. I vividly remember the first psychic experience I ever had. I was like 9 or 10 years old. Me and my sister were on the couch watching, I think it was Treasure Hunt, a game show with all these boxes, and you're supposed to guess which box had the check in it. And suddenly I just knew all the answers in the game show. I'm like, oh my gosh, that black lady, she's going to be picked. And she was, and we just laughed. I'm like, oh, it's that canister with the flowers in it. And sure enough, it was. And we just rolled on the floor laughing. I'm like, that giant box, that's the one with the check. And my sister's looking at me like, how do you know this? And I wasn't even thinking psychic, and I hadn't even heard that word at that point. And
so it was just, you didn't even have that as a reference.
No, I just thought this was like something that was happening. And sure enough, I knew it all. And that was like, I don't know what happened on that day, but it was so cool. It was so much fun. And we just rolled with laughter. And after that happened, years later, when I started having experiences, I'm like, Victoria, do you remember that day when at that game show? And she's like, oh yeah, I do remember that. And I always go up to her and I'm like, you remember that? Because I don't want her to forget it, because she's my validation that, this happened. Because it really kind of just like, wow, I did have a psychic experience. Because I always said, no, I didn't. I don't believe in that stuff. And when it started happening, a lot, I'm like, wow, I just love it. It's sort of this really just wonderful, comforting feeling.
It really is. It really is. I had, was it last year? I had started, I'm in a mediumship course. I'm in my second year right now, but when I started the course, there was one point, I don't know what I was doing, something mundane, and I thought there was the words red ribbon popped right into my head. And I thought, oh, that's weird. And then I picked up my phone and I opened it to check Facebook, and there was a message or an article or something, a post that was posted into the student group by this woman about a red ribbon. And I thought, whoa, that's weird. That is weird. And it got so much weirder because the next day I went for a drive to pick up my daughter from my mother's house. And I think it was a Sunday, so there wasn't that much traffic. And I'm going over an overpass, and sprawled out right in the middle of the road is this red ribbon that was like 3 or 4 feet long, like just sprawled out and kind of entwined. I thought, oh my God, I took a picture of it. I had to go back around because I couldn't turn around or pull over where I was. I was so shocked. So I kind of went around the block and went back and took a picture of this ribbon. Like, it's just so crazy. I love it too. It's so much fun.
I've noticed that, or at least for me, and I've looked into this, when someone has a psychic experience, it's often something that they wouldn't normally encounter. It's something that's very unusual in their daily life, or very personal, or might affect them in some way. One of my favorite psychic experiences is I was driving to the bank, I need to go to the teller. And suddenly this image came into my mind of a very tall man wearing a leather jacket. And he looked kind of scruffy. He had very long hair, and he was whipping it around like a crazy guy. What is this? I'm like, this is a weird image to pop into my head. And it started getting, really sort of very vivid. I'm like, gosh, what is this? What is this? This is so strange. And I came, around the corner. I'm driving up to the bank, and I'm pulling up to the teller, and there he was, standing in front of the teller, looking very dangerous. I'm like, all right, this was clearly something that I saw before I saw it. And, and just his behavior was so unusual that I think it alerted me to it. And I'm like, or maybe this was a warning not to get too close. So I'd waited until he left. But I will never forget seeing him clairvoyantly, I guess you would call it, and then seeing him in reality, and just being able to compare the two is like, wow. Because sometimes you'll be out of body, and when I first started going out of body, I'm like, oh, gosh, this could be a dream. This is very dreamlike. What's going on? I need proof. I need proof. Right. And it was difficult at first because you're just walking around your house, and you're like, your awareness is a little tenuous. And finally, I'm like, okay, I'm out of body. Let's get proof. Or no, what happened was I was flying around, and I came upon this scene near my house. I lived near the LA River, which was all cemented in. And I came upon under this little overpass, and there was all this soil and grass and litter. And it was all this growing right out of the cement. I'm like, well, this is impossible. This has got to be a hallucination. You can't have grass growing out of cement. This doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, well, this is not too far from where I live, so I'm going to go there. And that's what I did. I woke up and I remembered it, thank God, because sometimes you don't.
Right.
And I'm like, oh gosh, I got to go there. And it wasn't far, so I went there. And I'm like, gosh, here's where it is. And I couldn't see it. I had to get out of my car and hike down to the edge of the river. And I looked down at it. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. There was a huge pile of soil, and all this grass was growing, and there was the 7-Up can faded from the sun.
My goodness.
I'm like, oh, it's real. This is real. And again, I got that weird feeling of like, wow, I already saw this. It looks a little different when you're out of body.
Yeah. Things do look a bit different, eh? Than what, like, I find when I'm having an OBE, my house, like, it will be my house, but it will have different elements to it. Yeah,
sometimes like there'll be a chair there that isn't, or you can walk into the past. I'm like, hey, this is how my house was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, because I had one when I was pregnant with my son. It's a long story, but I'll just like tell you this little snippet. And I had an OBE, and I was in my bedroom, and everything was the same. There was a light coming in from the hallway illuminating, my room, but there was a box of unopened diapers on the floor. And I didn't have any diapers yet at that point. But it was just everything was the same except this box of diapers in the middle of my floor. It's so weird.
It is very strange. Yeah. I remember my first OBE, I popped out and there was someone in my room. I'm like, hey, who are you? Who are you? And I got pulled right back in. I'm thinking now it's probably a spirit guide, or maybe, gosh, it was a very short person. Maybe it was an ET. I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about
it could have been, for sure.
Because I couldn't focus on them. I couldn't see them. And I'm like trying to look at their face.
Yeah.
Having interviewed people who've had, ET experiences, that's a thing. Sometimes it's hard to focus on what they actually look like.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So now I'm wondering.
It could have been an ET for sure.
No, it's all good. I just love the conversation that you two are having. I just wanted to ask, I want to go back to the bookstore for a second, your dream bookstore. What do you do? What books are inside the dream bookstore? How do you check the books out, or do you just smush them into your face and know? Like, what's your experience like in the dream bookstore?
Oh, I miss bookstores. They all faded away. That used to be one of my favorite things to do, is just go to the bookstore and walk down the aisles and run my fingers along the books and kind of feel what they might be about. I'm like, oh, this feels, pull it out. I'm like, whoa, this is something I should read. And it was like that. And I don't really remember, I remember one, and I pulled out a book. It was like the Book of Life. And I opened it, and it's like your whole life story. And it was actual images, kind of very Harry Potter-esque, with the living pictures. And it was so, so cool. I'm like, I got to find that book again. And I never have. But I do remember going to this one bookstore over and over again. I'm like, I'm here. And it's like, there are learning temples on the other side. There are healing temples. There are all these places you can visit. Often I'll just go to the standard heavenly realms, I call it. I'm not really a religious guy, but it's very much like you would think of heaven, with flowers and trees. And this is all your deceased loved ones and your pets. And it's the funnest place to visit. But there's all these different places you can go. And that bookstore, I haven't been there in a while, by the way. I'm going to have to do that and see if I can really pull something back more solid. Because, I'll be reading, and then I come back and I don't remember it. So I feel like we're doing all kinds of learning on the other side that is, hopefully one day we'll remember a lot of it. But
hopefully we're just like, quote, quote, downloading files. We're just like making the links, even if we're not deciphering it in consciousness. Hopefully we're still downloading the content to decrypt when it's relevant in that moment. And I wanted to talk to you also about parallel realities, because I'm so glad. Here's the thing I'm so happy that you already did. You already talked about like jumping out of your body, having an OBE, and then being able to verify it. Like you're because you are a researcher, and so you're somebody who's not just like, ooh la la, look at my experiences. I went to planet Xenon and I talked to the orb people, and like you're maybe doing that, but it's not just that. You're like testing things as you go because you are a researcher. It's just kind of inherent into who you are. So I wanted to know, like, what is your experiences in terms of hopping into parallel realities, and how do you ground that into your, like, first let's hear you talk about parallel realities, and then I want to hear, like, how do you assimilate that into this reality, and how do you contextualize it?
Yeah, that was something I did much later on. Initially, I was like, okay, is this real? Let's do the experiments, because I checked out all the books I could find on this subject. I'm like, well, hey, this person did this. Let me try that. Hey, they went to the Akashic realm. That sounds awesome. The Akashic library. Let's try that. This person rescued a lost soul. I've never done that. This person saw their silver cord. I've never seen mine. What's going on? Well, this person met an enlightened master. Wow, let's try that. And so, later on, I started having experiences where I'm like, I'm not even me. I'm someone else. And I'm living a completely different life. And sometimes you'll go back to it. And I'm like, wow, I have kids. I don't have any kids. And I love kids, so I get to experience that. And that's why I say we'll never miss the boat, because we're infinite and we're living all these different lives. And I'm so excited about it. I love exploring past lives. I'll call them past lives, because you get a real taste of that. And I've been many lives as a priest, which is very interesting. I was, a bad priest who just drank and withheld knowledge and ate all the best food, and I was just a terrible person. But others were such wonderful, simple, pure lives where I just prayed and got really in touch with the divine. And other lifetimes where I was a slave and I escaped thanks to this beautiful, wonderful white lady who didn't rat me out. She's like, "There's the door, go, run." And it's just so touching that all these experiences profoundly affect you in your present life. And you can really get in touch with your past lives if you look at your desires, your fears, your phobias, your interests. All these things are direct pointers to who you really are, your greater self. I have like a real strong interest in shipwrecks. I always have. And I never really understood it from a very young age. I was like a shipwreck expert by the age of 12. I had all the books. And I saw this psychic, and she's like, this is very early on. She's like, "You would be good at OBEs." I'm like, "Really? Why would you say that?" Because I just started getting interested in them. And she's like, what's with you and shipwrecks? And my eyes went real wide. I'm like, "Yeah, please tell me." And finally, I started exploring that. And yeah, I was a pirate with my sister-in-law, Christy. And she's like got this huge respect for the ocean. And she was there, and we were just these kind of rough and tumble pirates who were good, but we were not good. We were pirates. But we had our code of honor, if you know what I mean. And another where I was a soldier on a ship, and it just went down in a second. And I don't know, I'm just fascinated with ships. So that's another, yeah, I think I'm trying to figure all this out. Parallel realities, past lives, it's all going on at once. And we're like this little entity that's just sprouting out in all these various different directions. And it's a beautiful fractal of light and exploration. And there's no area that we're leaving unexplored. So it's exciting.
Yes, I love that. Really captured it. The word fractal, for so long I didn't get what was up with fractals, but now like I get like the whole concept of fractal reality, where all the things that we are, all the places that we exist are reflecting back on each other. And again, I just feel like this is something you could teach people, like, oh, did you want to learn about your past lives? Well, look at the things that are showing up in this lifetime. Pull on that thread. It's going to link you back to a past life.
It's so funny. I'll see people like, "Oh, I love this food." I'm like, "Ooh," and then suddenly you get a flash of like, "Well, you were Japanese in the past life," and you see it. I'm like, "Wow, it's really interesting." Yeah, definitely. Wow. That's a huge pointer.
Your psychic gifts are so strong. I don't think, and that's what people I love that we're kind of just pulling you out of the psychic closet as well on this show, where we're like pointing to how gifted you are and the range of abilities that you have. And, that brings us into this, one of the topics is, becoming superhuman. This is when I was chatting with you the other night in our pre-show chat, this idea that we have all this ability, we have all this access, and how you are exploring it. You're jumping right into it. Oh, this person experienced that. I'm going to try that. Oh, they went there. I'm going to go there. And you don't limit yourself. You don't say you can't do it. You just decide to hop in and do it. And it really shows what's possible to us, the range that's open to us if we choose to step into those waters. And I'm wondering, yeah, go ahead. You say
yeah. My dad taught me that. My mom taught me love, unconditional love, but my dad taught me you can do anything you want, you can achieve it. And he was a very powerful personality, very skeptical, by the way, even though he was super psychic. He didn't believe it. I remember once we were driving along and we were behind a truck, and he's like, "Never drive behind a truck because they can pick up gravel and break your windshield." And so he moves from behind the truck, and the sports car zooms in front of us, kicks up a piece of gravel and breaks the windshield. I just busted up into laughter and looked at him, and he didn't think anything of it. But he would do this all the time. And Yeah, I forgot where I was kind of going with that.
It's all good. I wanted to get, well, also, Linda, do you have anything? Because I don't want to, I know that you're chatting with the people. Did you
I'm
want to pop
chatting and
in?
we have some questions.
Yay!
Yes. So,
I know where I want to go next, but also I don't want to be a hog.
yeah,
so.
I want to make sure we capture a couple of these. So one of them, hang on, getting back there. So Preston, do you meet any, or did you meet any of your spirit guides to help you focus on what's most important at this time? And I'll follow that with, how does somebody know that they've got spirit guides or who their spirit guides are?
Oh gosh, such a great question, because I was started having all these OBEs, and I'm reading all the other people, and they're like, oh, my spirit guide is leading me around everywhere. I'm like, hey, I'm out here alone. I never saw my spirit guides for the longest time, and when I started having, the first OBEs, I would pop out and I'd get this really profound sense of loneliness. I'm like, I'm alone in this world. It was very strange. And they're like, I started reading more and more. I'm like, oh, gosh, where's my spirit guides? What's going on? And someone said, oh, look behind you. They're probably guiding you from behind. I'm like, oh, okay. So I popped, you always, when you go OBE, it's really good if you have intent, an agenda, if you a plan, because it's very easy to slip into a dream and you have to remain really focused. And so I pop out, I'm like, what was it I wanted to do? What was it? Oh yeah, spirit guides. And so I quickly turned around me, there was a coyote. I'm like, and I chased after him, and I did that, I did it over and over again, and I never could catch him, but I got a real sense of a Native American sort of, which I'm super into, shamanism and all of that. And it took me a long, long time to connect to spirit guides and enlightened masters, but I did it. One time, you always like pop out and I'm like, take me to a spirit guide, or take me to a past life, or I'm going here, I'm doing that. And I'm like, take me to my spirit guides. And I'm pulled through this tunnel, and suddenly I'm in a hallway, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I know it's in the next door, and I open the door, and it's my brother and my sister-in-law. I'm like, hey, did you guys know you're my spirit guides? And they were looking at me like, what? And so, you get these really weird experiences. But one of my favorite was I popped out of my body and I'm walking through the living room. I'm like, I'm doing it. It's always such breathless, wonderful excitement when I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here, I'm out. Yay. And I'm like, I want to see an enlightened master. I really, really want to meet an enlightened master. And this beautiful woman comes landing down on my balcony. She's dressed in this gorgeous gown. It's very flowing. She's got long blonde hair, blue eyes, very like Daryl Hannah, she kind of looked like. And just her eyes were sparkling. And I rushed up to her, and she gave this beatific smile. And she grabs me by my elbow and my armpit, and she says, keep your eyes open. Don't close your eyes. And she pulled me off so hard, I instantly closed my eyes because she scared the daylights out of me. And remembering her instructions, I opened them again immediately. And she's already flying away, and I'm being deposited in this grass field. I'm presuming on the other side somewhere. And there's this man in a wooden chair floating about 2 inches off the ground. And he looks very Obi-Wan Kenobi-like, just this old man with a beard and radiating wisdom, but he's very stoic. He's not a fun, happy guy. He's very wise and serious in his demeanor. And I go up to him, and I can just sense the power and intelligence and spirituality radiating off of him. And my instant feeling is like, I'm not worthy. Oh my gosh, you are so great. And I kind of fell to my knees a little bit. And he looks at me, and he speaks out loud, punctuating each word, which is unusual. Often it's very telepathy. And I've done this before, and you get these little, I guess, like cones, a Japanese cone, a little riddle to sort of figure out. And he says, when you do something, do it absolutely. I'm like, what? What the heck does that mean? What? And a giant tunnel appears, and it's a tunnel of light, and it pulls me right back into my body. And I wake up, and I remember it, and I write it down. And I'm like, this, and I just kept analyzing that sentence. And finally, I looked up the word absolutely, which means without condition, completely without expectation, and all these really kind of strong spiritual truths without attachment. And it's a way to really live your life in the moment. It just really changed the way because I was having a little bit of a hard time with life. It just changed the way I looked at everything. And it was just this beautiful message of how to live your life. My dad always said, never do anything half-ass. And he's right about that. And I always do. I dive into the deep end and I go way overboard and I just immerse myself in whatever I'm into. But that message from that guy really changed my life. It's really cool. And I got to meet a spiritual master. It was so much fun just being in their presence. You just vibrate with this energy. It's just so much fun.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. What resonates with me with that is like that, do it absolutely, is like completely commit and don't hold yourself back from just like what you're saying, like immerse yourself into the experience, and you don't have any conditions, you don't have any regulations, you're doing it absolutely. You're embodying whatever it is you've committed to. That's what I take from that.
Yeah, gosh, I wrote it. Oh, here it is. Without attachment, without condition, without limitation, completely, positively.
Wow.
That's what absolutely means. I'm like, wow, this is, attachment is a big thing in spiritual progress, because we're all get attached to this and that, and we're living halfway in the past and halfway in the future. And if you can just get into the present moment, and it starts to expand into the past and the future. And your present moment really starts to encompass everything, because there really is only the present moment. The future doesn't really exist, and neither does the past. And yet it does. And the present moment contains it all.
I'm getting it on the deeper level now that you're saying it, now that you're expanding on it. I'm getting it. I'm getting it. That is profound. Where if you're in the moment and you're not attached, you're not comparing to the past, and you're not hoping for the future, but you're just in the present moment, that's absolute. That's the absolute moment. Wow, which holds everything, holds the past and the future. Wow, I'm not even on acid right now, but I feel like I'm just like, my brain's like,
yeah, we're so much more powerful than people realize.
Yeah,
absolutely do anything. I knew a lady who was super psychic. I mean, I just couldn't believe the things she would do. She would say something, it would happen. And she was able to manifest like nobody's business. And she taught me how powerful we truly are. We can do anything.
Well, that's where I want to go next, but I want Miss Jillian to hop in and give some questions or feedback if you have anything at the moment, Jillian. Because I know where I want to swing into just on that point, Preston.
Yeah, you go ahead, because my stuff, I mean, everything else has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So
okay, well, it'll all swing back around. Also, we're gonna have Preston on again. We've already decided we're gonna have a part 2 with Preston. So I wanted to talk about let's talk about becoming superhuman, because in our pre-show talk, you were talking about teleportation and all of these abilities that we have, being able to see astrally, like being able to see people psychically if there's an astral visitor in your space, but you're still in your body, but you can see them astrally. Just all of the range of things that maybe people would say, that's not quite so much true. Like, we'll get there someday. We're hundreds of years away from that. But I want to know what your experience is for, like, or what your knowledge is, what you know about, for example, teleportation, or doing things that seem like we're eons away from it.
Yeah, just swinging back to UFOs right here real quick. This is one of the main ET agendas. And this is, people have scary UFO experiences, and they abducted me, they kidnapped me, I was terrified, which it can be a very scary experience, but it's also extremely enlightening. When someone's taken on board a UFO, they're often physically examined, and that can be a little disconcerting, but they're, if they can get over their fear, they're given messages about our planet, warnings about nuclear proliferation and pollution in our warlike ways. They're taken to the engine room and told how the craft flies, or even sat in the chair and they're allowed to fly the craft. I hear that all the time. And also, they're given spiritual messages. It's a very, very strong spiritual component to UFO encounters. Almost everyone I've interviewed who has repeated onboard experiences are super spiritual. They're healers. They're super psychic. They can channel. They do mediumship, all this stuff. And that's a main ET agenda, to wake us up to who we are. And boy, you should see me on the other side, the things I can do. On the other side, it's natural to levitate. This is a natural human ability. I wrote a book called Human Levitation because of it. I have to investigate human levitation now. And that's an absolutely real phenomena that has been verified in a laboratory setting over and over again. It's in every culture. There's 300-400 documented cases. It's very well verified. I don't think people realize how well verified human levitation is. We can fly. We can absolutely fly here on the physical plane. No kidding. I know people who've done it. I've talked to them firsthand. I've never been able to do it, but I felt close sometimes because it's very connected to out-of-body experiences. Marilyn Hughes, I interviewed her. She's a very famous astral traveler. And she's like, oh yeah, that happened to me. And another experiencer, Dolly. Hi, Dolly. She's probably listening. She had a levitation experience. Robert Monroe, the out-of-body guy, had too. And so that's when I started looking into this. I'm like, wow, what abilities do we have? Because I was having all kinds of telepathy experiences. And yeah, telekinesis, that's totally natural on the other side. You want something, you're like, point at it. Sometimes I have to summon up real anger and energy to come to me, come to me, come to me. And boom, the object comes to me. And that's another thing I haven't been able to do here, but Dolly did it. I love Dolly because I often go out of body and I'd appear in front of family members. I'm like, hey, look at me, and they can't see me. I'll be walking in front of people. I'm like, hello, hello, hello. And they don't see me. And finally, I went to Dolly's house in Florida and popped in front of her, and she whirled around and she looked at me and she talked to me and she's like, I can't talk, I'm with Rob. And I thought she says, I'm being robbed. is what I thought she said. And I'm like, what? And I called her up. I'm like, did you see me? And she's like, yeah, I saw you. I talked to you. Didn't you hear me? I'm like, yeah. What did you say? No. And I'm like, oh, that's what you said. And then she came to my house and appeared in front of me. We've done this a couple of times. And once she came, she stomped on the floor. I mean, she could physically affect reality. I've always tried to move objects when I'm out of body, and I've never been able to do it. And one guy's told me, he's like, oh, actually, all you have to do is lower your vibration a little bit, and you'll be able to do it, which explains why sometimes I'm out of body and I try to go through a wall and I bounce right off. My vibration is too low. I'm quasi-physical. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Yeah, we can do all of this stuff. And
Dolly, by the way, is on the conversation.
Dolly's on the conversation?
Yeah, Dolly says hi.
Awesome. I love her so much. She's really become my best friend. She's just really helping me along on the spiritual path. Because a lot of people don't like to talk about this. My family was like, oh my God. My dad says, I should have taken you to church. Because he abandoned religion at some point. And my older brothers all were dragged to church. And not me. I was, thank God.
Ironically.
I was freed from that sort of, rigid structure.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy about it. But oh gosh, when you go OBE, it raises your vibration, all your chakras get activated, and you immediately start recalling past lives. You'll start having telepathy, and you start having this whole wide variety of what are actually natural human abilities. The very strong interest in superhero movies is really interesting to me because anything these superheroes are doing, which we're like, oh my gosh, the Flash, and he's teleporting. That's what he's doing. Superman, he's levitating. We can turn invisible. My sister-in-law, it's so funny. She has this way of just sitting down and very quietly, and you can walk into a room and you don't see her. And suddenly you're like, whoa, I didn't even know you were there. and I used to do that too. That was my way of staying up late at night when I was a little kid. I could sit in the corner of the couch and no one would even see me there. And then suddenly it'd be 11 o'clock and hey, how long have you been there? I'm like, I've been here the whole time. So it's really interesting how we sort of creep towards these abilities, and it's a natural evolution on the spiritual path. They're called cities in the Eastern culture, SIDDHES, cities. And these are signals, little indications that you're traveling along the spiritual path. And as this is going to happen to everybody. Everyone's going to be having out-of-body experience, conscious ones. We all have OBEs. Anyway, people just aren't remembering them. But as we all travel along the spiritual path, everyone is going to have clairvoyance. Everyone is going to experience all of this because it's part of being human. It's who we are. We are connected to the entire universe. And we have all the power of the universe in us. Anything that the universe can do, you can do it because you are the universe.
Wow. When you break it down like that, that feels logical. Like on a spiritual level, that feels very logical. I want to talk more about the whole being able to fly, being able to have superpowers, but I also want to make sure one of the things that we talk about is precognition. And precognition would be one of those supernatural abilities, but maybe not as dramatic as flying. Like that one, I'm gonna definitely swing back around to and be like, tell me more about how we can. I didn't know that this levitation business. I didn't know levitation. I'm down for it, right? I'm in, but I didn't know that it had been documented. So like that to me is really fascinating because I'm all about the emergence of dimensions and this dimension expanding and raising a frequency. But do tell about your experience with coming back in from OBE and then having a precognitive dream that is connected, and your experiences with being precognitive.
Yeah, OBEs are all about dreams. Dreams are one of the easiest pathways to having OBEs. Just write down your dreams. It's very important, and it'll evolve into lucid dreaming, which is a form of an OBE. And you'll start having OBEs. And every time I would have an OBE, I would pretty much come back, not every time, but often, with a dream that I kind of knew was precognitive because they've got a certain flavor to them. There's different levels of dreaming. I mean, you can dream about the movie you saw last night, or you can dream about your fears and desires. I wrote down every dream I've ever had. I mean, I studied dreams to death. And after I did, I threw away half my dream books because they were just garbage. I couldn't, the dream symbology books, I'm like, oh gosh, these guys are not getting it. Lucid dreaming and precognitive dreaming is actually a very high level of dreaming. And if you can remember like 4 dreams a night, dollars to donuts, one of them is going to be precognitive. And I started to recognize them. I'm like, well, this dream doesn't fit any of my fears or desires. It's very unusual. It's weird. And well, here's an example. I dreamt I was attacked by a baby pet goat. I'm like, well, this is weird. I mean, what could this possibly mean? I love animals. I'm all about animals. Many of my precognitive dreams will involve animals for whatever reason. I'm like, well, this can't come true, even though it feels like it might, because there's just no way I'm going to be attacked by a goat. I just cannot see this happening. And I'm watching TV, and a story comes on the news, and a guy had been attacked by his pet goat and killed. And I'm like, oh, and when it starts to happen, when you start to like realize, oh my gosh, this is my dream, reality shifts, and all these little sparkles appear, and the world becomes very dreamlike. And what I started to realize is like, when you have a lucid dream, your first moment of becoming lucid, it is profound. It's like, wow, I'm awake in the dream and you're in this whole new world and you're awake and it's more real than reality itself. Like, wow, and everything's sparkling and it's incredible. And you're like, I'm lucid in the dream world. This is like a video game and I'm inside of it. This is awesome. And then I would have a precognitive dream. Gosh, I've got so many of them. And when it happens, suddenly reality shifts and it all becomes very dreamlike and little sparkles. And
when you are in the physical world and the precognitive dream comes to fruition, it's like you step between, and now you're between this physical reality and that dream world. And that's when you see the sparkles. Am I understanding that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started to call it waking lucidity, and that's what I really want to write a book about, because it is like coming full circle. It's like, wow, now I see how reality, physical reality, is kind of a dream. I mean, it really is. And we sort of create our reality to a certain extent. And it's all a projection. It's all a weird kind of crystallized hallucination.
Crystallized hallucination. Hashtag crystallized. Thank you, Linda. She's like, I got it. Crystallized.
I do have a question on it, though.
Okay.
As you have these experiences, I know for me, I always joke that time is relative, because I could go somewhere and think an hour has passed and 6 hours has passed. And it just seems like an hour. I have the worst time management ever, because it just,
I love this.
I can stretch time. I can, do you have that same thing? Because I think that as we open up, time becomes so much more relative. It becomes.
Yeah, I noticed this when I was interviewing
like a rubber band.
Yeah, I would be interviewing contactees, and it's like they had no sense of time. I'm like, we've been on the phone for 3 hours. Do you not realize that? And it's funny, you'll be at work, and I'm like, gosh, time is dragging. Will this day ever end? And I started to play with time. And you can see this with little kids. And I remember like Christmas is 3 weeks away. It's going to take forever. And now, as you get older and older, time is like, wow, it's like sliding by. And you can absolutely play with time. And it's all about events and filling the time with activities. And yeah, time is not at all what we think it is. And I really wonder about the ET's ability to telescope and compress time. They do that all the time. I mean, they have a super strong ability to do this. I've talked to people who've been like pulled out of car accidents and healed, and they go on these big adventures and they're doing all this stuff. And then they're put back to the scene of the accident 1 second later. It's like, wow, the ETs can do that. Like, I mean, it's incredible what they do with time. And there's a real lesson there. Time is not what we think it is. And it's so cool because you see it when you go out of body. You're like, wow. And the higher you go, the more you get sort of this all-encompassing moment and you can just see reality as like one present moment. And it's just, once I went to see the Titanic, I'm all about shipwrecks. I told you that. I'm like, let's go visit the Titanic. That sounds like fun. I know other people who have visited historical events. And I'm out of body and I'm in this weird cloudy realm and I'm traveling. I'm like, this is taking too long. I'm going to lose consciousness because I can only maintain awareness for so long out of body, at least at that point. And I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to make it there. Let's look. There's these cloud layers below me. I'm like, let's go and see what's down there. So I dive down there and boom, I'm on Earth, I guess, but it was the past because I could see all these giant ferns and weird foliage. I'm like, oh my gosh, this must be back in time. Where am I? I'm trying to orient myself. And I looked and there was this wild cat, a cougar or a lion or something along those lines, perfectly blended into the grass. And it saw me. I'm like, well, this might not be good. And in 1 second, it was on me and had its jaws wrapped around my neck. And I'm like, oh gosh. And I'm like, that's enough. I'm pulling out. And I think that was probably a past life because often what happens is when you explore past lives, you're taken to the death scene.
Yeah.
the trauma that you're perhaps carrying over into your present life. I think maybe that's what that was, because I've done that. Whenever I call for a past life, that's what usually happens. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm raped and killed, or gosh, I was in the Holocaust and that was horrible, and all that stuff. I mean, not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, I think that happens on one level to help clear out the trauma from the psychic body. Like we go back to those death points so we can clear the trauma out of our psychic field and our emotional field, so it's not stuck in us anymore. It's like those wounds are asking us to come back and have that moment of clearing and resolution.
Yeah, it's very, very healing too. I mean, you can cure yourself of physical disease. Robert Monroe did it. Now, Bruce Moen, he was suffering from sarcoidosis, a chronic liver condition that was gonna kill him. Turned out it was caused by a past life, where he was stabbed by a spear. And Ian Watson, I think that's his name, did all this research into past lives, and thank God for his research. I mean, he locked it down. Reincarnation is real. If you read his stuff, it's absolutely fantastic research.
What's his name again?
Ian Watson, is that it?
Ian Watson? Okay.
I think that's it. And he did all this research into birthmarks and how people would have, their birthmarks was an indication of where they got shot or stabbed or what have you. And it's just incredible how connected we are to our past lives, and remembering them is incredibly healing. And I think that's why it's super important work to do. And if you do pop out of body, at some point that will happen. And at some point you're going to be dragged into rescuing lost souls, which is a huge problem. People are getting earthbound. People who are skeptical of life after death often pop out of their bodies, after they die, and never even consider the possibility that they've passed away. And at some point, I thought I was rescuing lost souls. Wow, that's so cool.
Wow, this is just incredible. You have said so many things that I want to touch in on, not just to mention also killer baby goats. That's disconcerting right there, where I'm like, killer baby goats. Okay, that's a thing now that I'm going to have to worry about. But the point is, I would just bring it back to this moment of where you had this precognitive dream that comes to fruition in your waking reality. And in that moment, you are the anchor point between what we call the dream world and what we call the waking world, but it's what you call waking lucidity. There's something about being that anchor point, which is so, I can feel it in my body. It's so powerful to be able to be that anchor point between those dimensions. And you're doing it just naturally by embracing who you are and your gifts. This is huge. And then I also wanted, and also Miss Jillian or Miss Linda, if you have things to pop in with, please let me know. The other thing was, I wanted to ask you was, how do ETs telescope in time? Like, what does that mean? And ET is telescoping through time or in time. Can you translate that for me?
Yeah, I actually did a whole convention once. I spoke about ETs and time travel, and I researched I researched it in depth, because sometimes contactees are told, like, oh guys, you guys don't know what time even is, do you? They have this ability to, often someone's like pulled out of their bed and they're being sucked up into a craft, and this happened to one lady in one of my books, Onboard UFO Encounters. She described this. She flying up through her house, and she looks down in the street and everything's stopped. Nothing's moving. The cars are stopped. People, birds are still in the sky, no wind. And I'm like, wow, did ETs stop time in the entire universe? I don't think so, because the universe is awfully large. You can't like stop time, can you? I'm like, well, let's think about this. Think. Because if you just meditate on something, you can really start to get some insight into it. Because we've got this we have a mental body. That's, we're all very, very powerful beings. And if we focus on that aspect of ourselves, we can sort of pull into it. I'm like, well, okay, what is going on here? And I think you can pull yourself sort of out of the time stream into another level of time, and time flows quicker on each realm the higher you go. And I started to realize, like, mediums, they talk really fast, sort of like contactees. I'm like, please slow down. I can't keep up with you. You're talking way too fast. The energy that's coming off of them, it's like, I'm like, oh, they're on the next, they're living on the astral plane. And this is like enlightened masters on earth, where people who are living here on earth, we have like moments of precognition. They're living in it. They will have moments of waking lucidity. They live their life in waking lucidity. And that would be a lovely point that I would love to get to.
Well, you're doing it, Preston. You're doing it. I'm getting such chills up through my legs. Miss Julian, I know you had an experience with time stopping with your UFO encounter. Do you want to pop in and reflect on that, or ask Mr. Denton anything? Professor Denton?
It wasn't time stopping, but it was, so I'll just tell you the whole story. So I did a meditation one night, like a contact meditation. It wasn't CE5, but it was a meditation just to kind of connect with any, galactics that may be around, and there's methods to it. So I did that. And then I went outside on my deck, and I was sitting there, and it was a clear night, like not a star in the sky or a cloud in the sky. It wasn't quite dark yet. Like just completely clear. And I live by an airport. So normally there's planes going by, but because right now there's hardly any air traffic going on. So I sat there and I thought, you know what? This would be a really good time to show yourself. Like, if there's something out there, could you please, do me a favor and look at the sky? Like, if there's nothing going on, just, can you do this? And anyways, I said, thank you. And so I'm sitting there, or please, sorry. So I'm sitting there, and I'm just kind of, glancing at the sky, not really looking at any particular spot, but then I see something starting to manifest. And I mean, I recognize it just from my study of CE5. It was like it kind of looked like a blob. Like, it didn't look like a cloud, but it looked like a blob of something. And there was a distortion field around it. Kind of like, the way I would describe it, almost like static from a TV around it. And I'm looking at it, and it's, it's not quite in this dimension, but it's enough that I can see it. My eyes are on it. Like, there's no question that I'm, not seeing what I'm seeing. So I thought, oh wow. Like, I sent out love, and I sent out thank you, and, I appreciate it, and this and that. And then I said, since you're here, can you please move over to the right? And as soon as I said that, it moved way over to the right, and it stopped. And I said, thank you. Can you please move back over to where you were? And as soon as I said it, it moved right back to where I had originally seen it. This happened 3 times back and forth. So 6 movements of it going back and forth directly after my request. And it was like, it wasn't anything about like time, but it was just, seeing that was the most validating experience that I could have possibly had regarding a UFO, because of the methods that I had learned through the CE5, just, to kind of gain validation. And that was amazing.
Love it when that happens.
Yeah.
I mentioned this lady earlier who could manifest stuff like nobody's business. I'll call her Wendy. She doesn't want her real name used, but I was interviewing her, and she's like had abductions. She's like had hybrid babies, and all these incredible experiences. I mean, she was like full on contactee. Her friends had seen UFOs, her family, wherever she moves, there's a UFO wave over her house. And so I've interviewed her. I'm like, gosh, I know she's telling me the truth, but this is a lot. for me to absorb. Could she be deluded? Maybe this is a fantasy. What's going on? Oh gosh, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. It was just too much. So I'm transcribing our interview. I'm in my condo where I lived in Canoga Park, 3rd story condo. I'm like, and I lean back on my chair. I'm like, gosh, is she telling me the truth? I know she is. I'm like, just gosh, is this real? I got this real strong impulse that I could not resist to run out into the roof of my condo. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I need, and I'm like, gosh, and I couldn't stop myself. And I'm slightly nearsighted. I grabbed my glasses and I ran out onto the roof of the condo. I'm like, what am I doing? You're not allowed on the roof. You're not supposed to go up there. And I was up there maybe 10, 20 seconds when a UFO appears. And it's like right across the street and very low. It's this giant orange orb. And it says, hello, it's us. We're Wendy's ETs. You didn't believe us, huh? Well, watch this. And almost in those words, but a real kind of ball of message. It wasn't like English speaking all in a sentence. It was all at once.
Like a transmit, like a download or a transmission. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I literally fell back against the wall there. I'm like, whoa, it's talking to me. This is amazing. It was like full on. I'd never had that before.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And then it starts darting around like, watch this. And you don't believe, watch this. It's like, dung, 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 dung. And then disappeared. God. It was just 20 seconds, maybe, not even a minute. And,
but still, that's all it takes. I mean, it doesn't matter how long it lasts. Like once you see something like that, there's no going back.
Yeah, I called her up. I'm like, Wendy, oh my God, your ETs came and said hi. It's like, really? I told you. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to see a UFO. And she's like, well, you just saw one, Preston. I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't ready. And she's like, oh,
please do it around my scheduling.
She says, okay, I'll ask them. She's like, I'm like, really? You can do that? Because I've had other people try and it never worked out. It's such a waste of time. And I'm like, the CE5 work is sometimes really frustrating because it's hours and hours out there at night waiting and hoping and nothing happens.
Right.
And she's like, okay. And she calls me up like a week or two later. She says, okay, they're going to come. We have to go drive to this location and they will appear. I'm like, sure, they will. Let's do it. And this was just off the 210 freeway in Pasadena near La Tuna Canyon. I remember it vividly. I brought my sister-in-law, Kisara. She does all the artwork for me. She's my spiritual guide in living flesh. And her nephew, James. And all 4 of us went up there, me, Wendy, Christy, and James. And we pulled off the freeway. We parked on the freeway. You're not supposed to do that. I'm like, really? You want to park here? And she's like, yeah, this is where they said to go. So we hike up this little hill. It's actually a pretty big hill. It was quite a hike. And Wendy and I get to the top first. We're a couple of 100 yards ahead of Christy and James. They're out of view. They're like several hundred yards down. And we get to the top of the hill and Wendy screams and she spins me around. She's like, look! And right next to us, I'm like across the street, the house right across your street, 50 feet away, was this giant sphere. And it is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. It was
big,
exquisite. It was the size of a house, perfectly round, covered with golden lights that had this divine energy coming off of it. And just incredibly beautiful. It aches. I mean, it hurts me. It was so beautiful. One of these days, that's how I'm going to die. I'm going to see a sunset. I'm like, that's just too beautiful.
Way to go. What a way to go.
And that was the feeling I got. And we're just screaming and jumping up and down and looking at it. And it was, I didn't get any real messages other than, hi, it's
hey.
And we're just looking at it. And I'm like, wow, it was 20 feet off the ground. I mean, this was low and close. And I will never, ever forget that experience. And it floats there for 10, 20 seconds, starts to slowly move away. And then it zips around the mountain like a bullet. You can see this tracer of light. And Christy and James walk up, they're all casual, and they're looking at us, and we're like, and we couldn't even talk. And they're like, what? And we're like, I was so sad they missed it. I was so sad.
Wow.
But yeah, they do that. They just show themselves sometimes to the person they want to.
Yeah.
And it was.
I had that experience once, Preston. I actually had one time where a UFO came over our house while I was watching meteors. It's a meteor shower, and the sky just started blackening. And it was almost like Star Wars, where you saw the ship come in at the very beginning, blotting out the stars. And I remember my dogs were going in circles, and they were whining and freaking out. And I remember seeing it and walking underneath it and being very cognizant of, what am I looking at? Is it silent? Yes. How big is it? Is it bigger than a hang glider? Could it be a stealth that's going too slow? My God, I'm walking underneath it. I'm in the middle of the yard looking up at it. And it's like, wait a minute. There's this thing at one point that goes, it's cloaked. It probably, whether it's ours or theirs, does not appreciate me looking up at it, standing underneath it. And this is probably a really stupid thing to be doing right now. and I remember dodging back into the house, and I didn't want to take my eyes off it. So I'm yelling at my husband, just yelling, trying to get him to come out and see it. He doesn't hear me. He never heard the entire thing. He never heard me yelling at him. He was in the next room. And I always thought, well, maybe they took him. But I'm starting, as I have all these discussions with people, it's like, well, maybe it wasn't, because I have no idea how much time was that. The one thing he said when I came back in is, God, how long were you out there? And to me, it was minutes. And that's the one thing that I think about, is like, gosh, for him, it seemed a lot longer than it did for me. And so I had that experience. And I had another one where my science teacher cousin, my niece, and I all followed a different type of UFO through 2 towns. I saw it coming over. It was my parents' 50th anniversary. I, for some reason, had this huge urge to drive out of my way and drive past where they celebrated. And I saw these lights in the sky above it that were colored. And it looked like, if you had lights from the ground shining up in different colors on the clouds, but there were no lights down on the ground. Because I kept looking, it's like, well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that they had that at this location. I called my cousin, who's a 2 miles down the road, and I said, do you see this in the clouds? He goes, yeah, what is it? I said, UFO. And so he gets in the car with my niece, and I'm waiting for them. It waits with me for them to show up. And I'm standing in the only intersection in this little town of LaPorte, Colorado. It's a little tiny, and there's a place called the Sleep Dog bar, the only bar. And it's hovering above it. And I'm at a gas station waiting for them to show up. And I'm asking people, do you see that? Do you see that? And one guy goes, what? It's a helicopter. It's a helicopter in the clouds. It's like, wouldn't you think that the clouds would blow away if it was a helicopter in the clouds? Wouldn't? And then I had somebody else say, I don't know what you're talking about. No one saw it. I'd stand there and point at it, and I was so frustrated. But my cousin saw it, and we all followed it, zigzagging through all the way to 2 towns later. And then he chickened out.
I've seen this so many times.
He chickened out.
Yeah, seen that over and over again. I once interviewed a guy, a teenager, who had an encounter, and he was so upset because he was with his friends. All 4 of them were right there together, standing next to each other, and only he could see the UFO. And he was like pointing out at his friends, like, no, there's nothing there. What are you talking about? They couldn't see anything. I mean, they didn't see anything. And talked to a guy who was on a Navy ship, which has hundreds of people on it. He's on deck looking at this UFO, which actually took him on board. Kevin Kamen. Yeah, he's a medic, a great witness.
What's his name again?
Kevin Kamen.
Kevin Katman.
Yeah,
Right.
he was, I wrote about his experience in one of my books, and it's such an incredible experience he had, because he had a friend who was a contactee. It was his friend on the ship, and he didn't believe his friend. He's like, "Oh yeah, sure, you're a contactee. Well, I want to meet your little green men." And he's like, "Okay, well, I'll arrange it."
Okay.
and and he had an experience from his Navy ship and pulled on board, met 15-foot tall praying mantis type beings, who he said just radiated intelligence and spirituality. Scared him pretty bad. He says it was a overall benevolent experience, but it really frightened him.
Wow.
And yeah, they can just do that. It's incredible. I remember once I was leading a CSETI group. I had joined CSETI headed by Stephen Greer, who was all about, calling down UFOs. And he came to LA. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to attend his lecture because he wants $300. And sorry, I'm not going to pay $300 to hear you speak. And the newspaper calls me up and says, I don't know why we're doing this, but we would like to pay your way if you'll write an article. I'm like, what? and they're like, I we've never done this. I don't know why we're doing this. And I'm like, well, I kind of do. And so I got to join CSETI, and we started having experiences, a lot of them over a period of 5 years. And I never, I'm more of a wallflower. I don't want attention. I don't want people looking at me. I don't want to lead the group. But I finally, like, it's your turn. I'm like, fine, I'll do it. And so I was leading the meditation, and we're all just doing this sort of coherent thought sequencing and visualizing and trying to call something down, when suddenly I got this really strong impulse. There it is again. I've heard so many people tell me this about the impulse. I'm like, they're up there, they're up there, they're up there. Open your eyes, they're up there. Look up, look up. I'm like, I don't want to interrupt my meditation. I don't want to. Finally, I'm like, I just couldn't stop myself. And I opened my eyes and looked up, and boom, they appear. And it's this giant ball of light, and just grows and grows and grows until it's covering half the sky. I mean, no kidding. Sky is pretty big. So, I mean, this thing was gigantic. And I was just completely shocked. I didn't even have time to tell any of the people in the group, and it disappeared. And I'm like, well, guess that was just for me. And I told him, and they're like looking at me like, well, why didn't you say anything? I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm telling you, this happened. And later did get a call from someone who was driving through the canyon. This was in Topanga Canyon. And they're like, oh, we had this amazing experience. I'm like, what time was it? Because they were a mile away from where we were. Like, oh, it was around 9:30. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was it. They saw it too.
Nice. So you had that validation. That is huge. I wanted to ask you, we're coming up, bumping up to the end of the show, but I wanted to ask you, outside of like direct ET experiences, do you have any reports or stories of people being able to teleport either intentionally or spontaneously? Maybe they teleport into another dimension and then pop back in. What is your, what superhuman experiences have you heard about with teleportation specifically?
Yeah, I looked into that and I couldn't find a whole lot of accounts, but I did, in my book, Human Levitation. I really dug deep looking for that. And I found, it was a guy by the name of Dushan Gersi. He was an anthropologist who went all over the world, interviewing people. And he heard about this group of individuals who had formed sort of a special group. They were called the Flying Men. And they had this ability to teleport. And we talked to some of these guys and got their firsthand accounts. And they were able to just go wherever they want around the world. And
what did they, tell me more, all ears.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, this is very interesting. And you look at some of these accounts of levitation, and the people who finally wake up with this ability to levitate do have this ability to just pop from place to place. And you see this when you're out of body, because sometimes you're like, okay, I want to visit Area 51. That was what I put that on my list because I heard about other people doing it. I'm like, hey, they can do it, so can I. That was always kind of my motto. I'm like, if they can, I can. And I popped out of body. And sometimes when I try to go to somewhere else on Earth, I'm like meandering along at 5 miles an hour or 20 or 30. And like I wanted to go to the moon, same thing. Robert Monroe did it. I'm like, hey, if he can do it, so can I. And same thing happened in both those cases. I'm like meandering along. I'm like, gosh, you guys, I only have like 3 minutes of awareness. And then boom, I'm there. It's like you're traveling along, and then boom, you teleport. I went to San Diego that way. I went to Florida that way to visit Dolly. you just, distance is an illusion. The universe is infinite, right? And just the concept of infinity makes me realize, well, the universe is about the size of a tiny little dot, or it's as big as infinity. Distance doesn't really make sense if you can travel instantly to one location to another. Rate times time equals distance. So if distance and rate collapse, well, that collapses time. And it's, I'm getting lost in the other dimensions now.
Yeah, you're so connected. You are so connected. Well, so you're saying that your experience with going from an OBE to teleportation is one thing, but you're saying there are people who physically, once they have learned how to actually levitate, those people report being able to teleport physically. They can physically teleport.
Yeah.
This is okay.
Yeah. At some point in your spiritual evolution, you start to really connect your physical body with the astral body. I think they call it like the rainbow body. And you can instantly heal, and you can levitate, and you can teleport. And all these things that you do on the astral plane as you practice there begin to translate into the physical world.
Okay.
And I wrote about it. And I'm like, wow,
Which book?
This is again human levitation.
Okay. Okay.
Writing that book was just really lifted me up. I'm like, wow, this is so incredible. Because like this is how Milarepa, he's like the Indian saint, one of the main figures in Indian culture, and he started flying in his dreams and in his OBEs, and then he started physically levitating. And this is what happened to Robert Monroe. He was like the guy in Western culture, at least, on how to go out of body. That's how I started. I picked up his book, and it's like, oh, you can do it. All you have to do is, these 3 things, meditate, relax your physical body, relax your mind, and do these visualizations. And I'm like, wow, this sounds a little scary, but let's try it. And yeah, he was absolutely right. We are superhuman. We can do anything. And it's just a matter of, I think the only real barrier people have is, skepticism. People are very self-defeating in a lot of ways. I can't. I'm like, yes, you can. You can do anything.
It's the belief system. Like if your belief system says you can't, then that's what you've agreed to. And again, this whole this thing that you got from the master, the ascended master, this being in the field, was whatever you do absolutely. And that applies to like this journey that you're on and that you're really teaching from your life, which is when you hear someone say, I visited Area 51, which is another interview, by the way. But like, I visited the moon, another interview. So it's like, you didn't say, oh, well, that's, like you didn't stop and say, that probably isn't real. That probably isn't. You didn't pull the curtain down. You just said, me too, and hopped out and did it. And I think that's like this level of graduation that you are teaching from your life experience of going from researcher, experiencer to embodied superhuman. I'm on my way. I'm doing it. I'm committing to the absolute. I'm committing to the absolute. And yeah, that is what you are really bringing us through this light vessel of your being into the world at this time. That's what I see.
Yeah, I remember when I found out UFOs were real, it completely collapsed my belief system. And I started going out of body, and that collapsed my belief. And I got to the point where I didn't believe anything. And I still don't. I'm very skeptical, ironically, of things, because beliefs, I don't trust them. Because anytime I think I believe something, I'm like, oh gosh, this is probably not going to last that long. Something's going to knock my belief system over.
So I love that. That's so liberating. That's so great.
Yeah. So people will tell me all this stuff, and I don't believe them for a second, even though I know that they're telling me the truth. And I do believe them because you can't help it. I mean, we all make judgments and we all discriminate. We can't help it. But I still I won't lock in. I'm not locked into anything because I am too afraid. It was so painful and so, gosh, just unrooting to have to go through that, that I don't want to have to go through that again. So now I'm just going to rely on experiential knowledge. And when I read some, Robert Monroe, like, I went to the moon. I'm like, sure you did. Which I believe he did, I know, but I want to do it myself and then I'll know. And, UFOs, are they real? Oh, I'm pretty sure they are. My brother chased one. My sister-in-law saw them. My other sister-in-law, my nephew, my sister-in-law saw gray aliens. I'm like, I know they're not lying. I'm like, but I got to see them. I want to see them. So that's what I did. I went out into the field. I camped out outside of people's homes who were having experiences, just waiting for the UFOs to show up, and ended up having a bunch of really amazing sightings.
Dude, you are so legit. That really is like your thing, is jumping all the way in and being like, I'm going to figure it out firsthand. I just admire that. I have a tiny crush on you now, just so you know.
I have some quick questions.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you. Exactly where I want to segue.
Several of them want to know if your books are available on Kindle, because it's a space limitation for them to have the books. They want to see if you've got them on Kindle.
Hey, I get that. Boy, when I was a kid, I was really into science fiction. I covered my room with books, and my dad's like, we're gonna have to throw these all away. My mom's like, don't you dare. And now I have one room devoted to books. My books are on Kindle, most of them. I'm arguing with some of the publishers about that. I'm like, no.
They were asking specifically the human levitation one.
Oh gosh, no, it's not. I'm arguing with the publisher about it. So that one's not, but most of my recent ones are. And now I won't agree to it unless it's put on Kindle as well. I'm trying to get them on Audible as well.
Ooh, nice.
Awesome.
Bit by bit.
A question came up, of all of the books that you have, where does somebody start? What's your book that you would recommend they start with?
You make me choose between my babies.
Which baby's prettiest? Which one do you love most?
Sophie's choice.
I've only written one on out of body, but that I love. It's a very fun, kind of breezy book on my own out of body experiences. The only autobiographical book I've written. Love the human levitation book. When it comes to UFOs, I would recommend either, Inside UFOs or Onboard UFO Encounters. I think those are, have really resonated with people. They've done really well. But please don't make me choose between my babies. I love them all.
We have the Amazon link in our description box below, so people can go look at all of Preston's babies and they can ask which one's right for them. And I'm sure the guides will give them a little nudge.
By the way, I do have excerpts of all my books, pretty extensive excerpts on my website. So.
And hopefully I put your website in the link below too. Boom. So that is there for people as well. So they can go read through the excerpts and then decide for themselves which one resonates. So you got a multitude of ways to be able to decide which Preston baby is your baby to take home. So that is awesome. Well, I'm gonna start rallying us into the closing. But Preston, you've opened so many. My mind, I feel like just windows have flung open in my own mind from this conversation. And I hope that everyone experiencing our conversation today has some connection with that as well, where you have just kind of melted down the doors and said, there's really no door. That's actually a belief system. And you can go right through that if you want. Any closing thoughts from our lovely salon members today? Miss Linda, do you have any closing thoughts? Miss Jillian?
My closing thought is, if you see this now or later and you really like it, then please like, share, subscribe so other people can see it. I think that we're definitely going to have Preston back if he was willing to come back. And I have all kinds of suggested topics from everyone, so that's great. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Linda. Miss Jillian?
And I had a blast. Thank you so much for coming on, just chit-chatting. Like, it's so fun to talk to someone else who just really, they get it. You know what I mean? It's not like you can go to your, friend circle and talk about UFOs all the time. And it's been a blast. And I do hope you come back. That would be so much fun. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys. Yeah, I had a blast too. I think afterwards I'm gonna go try and levitate because I'm like buzzing with energy right now. You guys have lifted me up. I'm like, it's such a joy. And yeah, we have to have fun. That's what life is all about. Is joy and love and fun. And yeah, I am just so happy right now.
That's awesome. What a gift. Thank you for sharing that with us. And yeah, if you love Preston, did you fall in love with Preston today? Like I fell in love with Preston? If you did, give us a like, hit the like button and let us know that you are joining on the bandwagon of becoming admirers, fans, and fellow explorers with Preston Dennett. I'd like to also remind everybody to check out those links below. That's where you can find all of Preston's information as well as our information. And please join our Facebook group. Preston, we'd love to have you join the Facebook group and be part of it if you're willing to, so we can hug you and love you up there. And then yeah, hit the notification bell so that way when we go live, you know that we're live. And sometimes we're a little wonky on our times with tech issues, but we do our best. And that is what I've got to say. Thank you again, Preston. What a pleasure, what an honor to get to know you on this level. Thank you for being with us today.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And all right, everyone, thank you to our audience, our live stream audience, and for showing up, sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your who you are, your authenticity. We love you, we appreciate you, and I hope that you will also join us on our Facebook group. So until next week, we will see you there. Take care.